I'm really excited for today's panel. I think James kind of gave a great intro for the panelists and what we're gonna
Thank you.
what we're gonna talk about here. I'm just gonna give each panelist about 30 seconds to talk about who they are and what they do, and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah, Sascha, I'm CEO of MOIA, and MOIA is a subsidiary of the Volkswagen Group. In my capacity for the Volkswagen Group, I'm also in charge for the commercialization of the autonomous vehicle ecosystem that we built within Volkswagen. We are known for our service in Hamburg. So when we launched MOIA in 2016, we said we want to be in the mobility space and we want to do something with autonomous vehicles, but we had no autonomous vehicles. So we started our commercial service with drivers to learn about the whole operations, how to manage a fleet, how to build a compelling product to our customers. And that's why we have our flagship operation in Hamburg. But actually, we offer a turnkey solution to fleet operators in cities to hook them up with all those, like I learned today, de-integrated SDS players that are on the horizon in the future. And for that purpose, we collaborate with Mobileye to integrate their technology into the ID. Buzz, so a four-seater vehicle that we will bring into market into Europe and the US.
Michael.
Michael White. I am the Chief Product Officer at Zoox. We are an autonomous robotaxi company. We're purpose-built, meaning we are manufacturing the vehicle from the ground up with the rider at the center of it. So we'll be launching later in Las Vegas and San Francisco to follow this year. So thanks for having me.
Stephen.
Hi, everyone. Stephen Hayes. I'm the VP of Autonomous Fleets, which includes FlexDrive, a subsidiary of Lyft that we'll talk more about, that directly owns and manages a large fleet of vehicles, as well as some broader operations functions at the company. Happy to be here.
Very cool. And then, wait, do we have anyone from Uber on the end, or they they missed this one? Well, Stephen, I want to start with you with Lyft, because I think if we start today, obviously, people know Lyft, people know Uber, they know the product from the consumer point of view. On the back end from the business though, I think rideshare has always been kind of a supply game. The more supply, the more demand you get. There's a famous, I think, napkin of the flywheel. How does AV change that? How does it impact that supply demand kind of function?
Yeah, it's a great question. Supply has always been the hardest part of the equation. If you want to offer consistent 3 to 5 minute ETAs, you need to have a really strong base of supply. And today we have that in the form of the 500,000 drivers a week who earn with us across the United States and Canada. But we are super excited about what autonomous can bring to our platform. One of the things that we've discussed is how rideshare is a very peak and trough focused business. So in LA, for example, our busiest hours on the platform are 6 times more active from a rides perspective than the lowest periods of the day. And so when we think about an autonomous future, we think about building a strong base of AV supply. And we love many things about AVs, not the least of which is the fact that, it's going to be attentive. It's not going to get tired. If we send a ride request, it will accept that ride request. And so we can kind of build a base of supply around AVs, and then leverage our drivers to help manage to the many peaks in our business.
And I mean, you talk about 6x during a normal week, right? Just from busy time during Monday through Sunday. What about New Year's Eve, right? I mean, I think one thing people forget is just how reliable Uber and Lyft are today. I can open the app right now. I have 100% confidence. I can basically go anywhere. Saturday night, same thing, right? That's not so much the case with, AV experiences right now. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions that autonomous companies are going to be thinking about is like, to what level do you want to fleet up to? Do you want to manage to the absolute peak of demand and not miss kind of a single incremental ride opportunity? The downside of that approach, of course, is you're sitting on a lot of unutilized assets at other periods of time. And so our goal is to be a great commercialization partner for autonomous companies and help them deploy their assets, monetize them, and ensure that for every mile that is accruing on that vehicle, it's a depreciating, expensive asset. As many of those miles as possible are revenue generating, and that's where we think we have a unique value that we can bring to bear for them.
Michael, what do you think about that from Zoox's perspective? What do you want? I know you're big, looking at your background on the customer experience, the journey, right? Like right now, I think you have a lot of early adopters of AV who honestly, like, they're willing to overlook a long ETA, pickup, bad drop off around the corner. My Waymo couldn't hit this location. It dropped me off around the corner, right? Things like that. What do you think that customer experience should be like, maybe more medium to longer term, right?
Yeah. So my background is in consumer experiences, bringing them to life. I've been at Zoox about 14 months, but before that I spent 12 years at Disney, primarily in parks as well, really bridging the digital with the physical. And when I was approached by Zoox, one of the things that really interesting to me was the way they're looking at putting the rider in the center of everything they do. And so they've done that as we're manufacturing the vehicle. So when you go in the vehicle, there's not a steering wheel. There aren't pedals. It's carriage seating where we would sit like we're sitting now, but we're facing each other. For me, it's, from the medium term to the longer term, it's really just creating that agency. And I don't mean that as a buzzword to say. It's really about transforming mobility in a way of just being ubiquitously part of your life. So when you're doing a reservation, it's just Zoox is going to be there for you, but it doesn't stop the continuation of where you're going from where you're going to. This is your space. This is your lounge. And to be able to configure it with persistency, meaning that every Zoox is exactly the same. You get full consistency in the fleet because they're all built the same way. That's the thing that we're really focused on. We really want this to be your vehicle.
Yeah. So I think with a purpose-built vehicle, you obviously have a lot more control over the experience, what riders feel when they get in. I guess answering Steven's question, though, how important is it, that when the customer opens that app, like basically, do you build to that peak or do you build to, lower average, right? And then, maybe the cars aren't used as much. Like what you have to prioritize.
Yeah.
Basically, you got to pick one, right?
Yeah.
Or do you?
Well, because we can control the supply. We also look at how our approach is really about this tiny, small, medium, large, and how we're going to go out from, launch in Las Vegas and also in San Francisco, and being able to scale as such as we're also, getting better capabilities, and also being able to really understand what the customer wants.
Got it. Sascha, you guys, I think one thing that stood out to me when we were chatting about MOIA is, like you mentioned, you're operating a Ridehail fleet right now, over 500 vehicles in Hamburg, all electric. I saw an ID Buzz on the way here. I don't know if you planted that or not, but I saw one on my ride up. Talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that, because you do have a lot of experience, 11 million pooled rides, it sounds like, and you're also building towards this AV future. So how are you thinking about the two?
Yeah, so first of all, what we do is we offer exclusively shared ride, and we are part of the public transport system. So we were awarded by the city of Hamburg to be a public transport operator, and so we are fully integrated into this environment. And we think that with the autonomous vehicles, we will be able to bridge the gap between the large capacity mass transit and on the other side, the very individual Ridehail business with taxis and with the private car on the other side. And for us, it's like this vehicle, this approach that we take definitely targets this sweet spot. And today in the environment, it's just not economically sustainable, because what we know from the human-driven operation is that once you got them on your payroll, you got all the problems about balancing the demand and supply, with the challenge that you have the peaks and valleys throughout the day. And with the autonomous fleets, we will definitely be able to be specifically able to target the supply needs of the public transport world, and at the same time be able to increase the quality of service for the customers. Because what we learned during the operation of our shared mobility service in Hamburg is that the most important aspects is safety, its reliability, and its comfort. And I think with the autonomous vehicles, we will have the consistency and we will have the scalability to serve all the customers that currently we are not able to serve during peak times. And that's definitely will increase the public acceptance of the autonomous vehicles for the space.
So are you already having some challenges right now serving that peak? Because when I look at my three panelists here, I look at Steven on the end, they've got, all human drivers, independent contractors. So I sort of think of that as variable supply, right? When I'm not driving for Lyft, they don't have to pay me. They don't have to worry about me or my car. You've got your own fleet, but, employee drivers, and Mike has, AVs that are hitting the road. So how do you think, you're kind of almost like on the road to AVs with employee drivers? How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's exactly how we understand that. So as our human drivers, they want to drive full shifts. So we need to make sure that we have sufficient supply, sufficient demand for the 8 hours that they want to operate. We have to take care of the break times of the drivers, etc. So there's a lot of complexity about how to manage the fleet and create sufficient demand to fuel this fleet. And so we think we are kind of a different optimization model than perhaps as Lyft is operating here in the US, where a primary goal of the whole fleet control system is more or less crowd control. So you need to make sure that you can distribute the drivers and you don't have the obligation to create the efficiency for your fleet. And I think with the autonomous vehicles coming up now, this is really a chance to resemble the peaks and valleys throughout the day to increase the efficiency and thus create a more efficient transportation system in the cities.
Got it. Stephen, made me think. So you ran FlexDrive at Lyft, and I guess I didn't even realize this, that you owned and still own and operate over 15,000 vehicles on the Lyft platform, which I think makes you one of the biggest fleet operators out there. I see a lot of people talking about being a fleet operator these days, especially in this transition to the AV world. What's it like being a fleet owner today with 15,000 cars?
Yeah, FlexDrive is perhaps like a well-kept secret at Lyft. We created FlexDrive 7 or 8 years ago because we wanted to provide a more consistent up-leveled experience. Mike's talking about the variability that you see on marketplaces, and it's true. And so we wanted to have more control over vehicle selection and onboarding. We got into it and we quickly realized that it's one thing to own and operate a handful of vehicles. It's quite another to do it to the tune of tens of thousands of vehicles. And we looked around and we didn't see a lot of technology to help us do that well. And so we started on this journey quite a while ago of creating these end-to-end capabilities around vehicle lifecycle management. And we had a hope and a premonition at the time back in the day that this would prove to be relevant in an autonomous future. And I think part of what's been rewarding lately as we really focus on gearing up for autonomy is seeing how relevant the lessons learned and frankly, the scar tissue that we've developed over the years running and managing a large fleet of vehicles, how extensible that is to autonomous. FlexDrive fleet ran 500 million miles on the road last year. And so we have spent a lot of time and energy on cost optimization, and we want to bring that to bear for our partners because cents per mile at that level of scale is really meaningful.
What's the hardest part? You can only pick one.
For us, turning vehicles back from collision and service and maintenance is a very complex undertaking. You can do it quickly, but then you might pay a significant premium for it. So I think finding the balance, optimizing between cycle time and cost is the line that we're always walking and figuring that out. And that's going to be even more important for an autonomous vehicle that instead of a cap cost of like $20,000 might be closer to $200,000.
Got it. Is that how much an autonomous vehicle costs?
I haven't talked about that, but yeah.
So I guess, Michael, when you think about, fleet owners that are out there right now operating, is there one aspect of the business that you don't want to do that you think would make sense for partnership? I mean, you guys are taking on, kind of like you said, two big challenges. You're building a purpose-built vehicle, and then you also have an actual AV service to run and deploy and commercialize, right?
Yeah, it's the three
And
parts.
the tech.
Yeah, no, it's really significant.
The tech too.
Yeah, it's absolutely significant what we're doing of building the vehicle and then writing the code, right? And making sure that the autonomy is all there, and then running the service. So for us, when we launch, we're going to go direct to consumer. It is going to be something that we're going to run. We're very, we say that very humbly though, knowing that as Stephen talks about the scar tissue that he and some of the other folks and the fellow travelers have gone through to learn that. So that's how we're looking at approaching it. And yeah, it's going to be a journey. For sure.
Got it. So the plan is to launch direct to consumer, kind of control that experience. Do you think in the future you would see yourself, like where would I get a Zoox in the future? Would it be on other apps, or you think what's my best experience?
But initially it's going to be right on our app.
On your app?
Yeah. So we'll be launching an app direct to consumer. And that's how you'll be able to ride hail from there. And
So I guess if I'm a customer, most people in the audience probably have Uber. They probably have Lyft download on their phone. A lot of people now have Waymo. I think I saw some hands go up when they took a Waymo. Has anyone not taken a Waymo yet? Okay, a couple. Well, I got a referral code for you if you need one. Let me know. I guess, are you expecting consumers to now download a fourth app, Zoox? And I mean, obviously there's other players.
in the marketplaces that they're in, not all 4 players, 3 players are going to be there. So in Las Vegas, that's where we're launching. So yeah, we think we're a differentiated ride experience. And so that's, how we're going to approach it with people, downloading the app and also being able to configure their ride, configure their comfort. So there's a lot of things that they'll be able to do. They're going to be unique to it. So that's where we're really, honestly excited to launch.
Got it. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the markets selection. You mentioned SF, Vegas, Sascha. One reason I was excited to have you on the panel coming from Europe is obviously we may not, I think I've seen you guys are testing on icy cold roads and there's a lot of different dynamics there. Can you talk a little bit about the market selection, maybe more broadly in Europe, but also, city by city, and then maybe we'll come back to Michael with the Vegas and SF.
Yeah, first of all, we have a very heterogeneous market in Europe when it comes to the regulation. That's pretty obvious because there is no standard regulation so far for AVs in Europe. It's still in the making, and even if we would have it, it would require a lot of time to more or less codify this in the individual states. And so there's a lot of different regulatory requirements that you have to take care of. At the same time, there's a huge demand from the space of public transportation, which is a lot stronger compared to the offerings that you have in the US, where they are faced with severe challenges due to the demographic change that we see in the whole European Union. So we know that a lot of the drivers that are currently operating buses and tram lines and trains, they will retire within the next 10 years. So there's a huge demand from this area to more or less not increase the quality of service, but to keep it on the same level. And dependent on the severity of the demographic change in the different states and due to the cost structure that comes with that for the human drivers, there is different demand from the public transport operators, from the authorities to bring this technology into market. And that's more or less that we follow more or less the logic that where city wants us, we are willing to discuss with them, because this gives us so much benefits in the regulator perspective, from the acceptance perspective, to collaborate, also from a financial perspective, to be able to share more or less the risks and the additional costs that the introduction of the autonomous vehicles bring. And this is our approach for the European market. And when we bring the autonomous vehicles to the US market, more or less, we rely on our channel partners that we will announce to more or less give us an indication where we will launch our services here in the ride-hailing industry.
Got it. Okay. Michael, can you talk a little bit about some of the differences between that SF and Vegas market? I mean, I think Vegas is a pretty challenging market, right?
Well, they both have their uniqueness to them, right? So Las Vegas is, but we're very deliberate in choosing both of those just because they're so unique to each other. San Francisco, as you all know, is very highly dense. There's a lot of people, there's scooters, there's all kinds of different things going on around you. There's hills, there's fog, there's a lot of different weather elements. Las Vegas, it's hot. It's hot. There's a lot of things that are going on within the strip. And each parts of the strip are kind of unique, meaning that there's a lot of resorts that need picked up. There's Allegiant Stadium where the Las Vegas Raiders are. There's T-Mobile Arena where there's concerts and hockey games that go on there too. With that comes a lot of burst of people that come in and out of there at certain times. There's also some uniqueness to the resorts themselves, given that they're on private property. And so there's a lot of rules when you're pulling into some of them, as far as, there's people that are flagging you to come go a certain direction. There's arms that go up and down, mechanical arms that let you in and out. So there's a lot of things when you're thinking about full autonomy with no steering wheel or no safety driver in there that you have to think through, which is a lot different than Las Vegas. We're also, there's some things that we're mapping in Miami and Austin as well. And there's some things there's a lot of things that are repeatable for us, But then there's things you learn. Like in Austin, for example, and I didn't really pay attention to this until the autonomy drivers were telling me about this, was that, the stop signs are horizontal, they're not vertical. And so it's training the AI as well in some of these unique markets that
you kind of reminded me one thing too. There's no safety driver in a Zoox because there's no steering wheel, right? So there literally cannot be a safety driver in the vehicle. I haven't taken one yet, but I guess does that mean the stakes are higher for you, right? You can't, a lot of these companies, they go out and they launch. Okay, I basically feel like any new autonomous vehicle launching, they never say it, but it always has a safety driver. So if they don't say it, it means they have a safety driver at this point. But you guys can't really do that, can you?
Yeah, well, so let me tell you a little bit about this. So we do have a safety driver when we're testing an autonomy. So when we're mapping the cities and we're testing our autonomous, we do that in a vehicle with a steering wheel, and we have drivers in there, right? And so they're testing that out. We also always have a human in the loop, right? So for us, we always have, we call our, remote operations there. So that's one for customers, if they have a question or something like that. But we're also making sure that we're following the vehicles as well and can give suggestions and nudges to it.
Got it. Okay. Stephen, I think we've got a few more minutes left here, and I think one thing too that we talked a little bit about is, sort of how you mentioned how drivers fit into that equation, with Lyft. Obviously right now, I think you said you have 500,000 drivers, you own 15,000 cars. I think you guys have talked recently about how you envision that combination going in the future. Do you want to lay that out a little?
Yeah. It's a big question. What this transition looks like, and our approach is to just try to be authentic and communicating with our drivers that we don't actually have all the answers as to what this is going to look like. I think the interesting thing is in some cities, autonomous is going to feel very far away for quite some time, and then in other cities like Vegas, like Austin, like San Francisco, it's gonna happen quickly, and drivers are going to feel the impact of autonomous vehicles on these marketplaces. What we do strongly believe is the hybrid network is a feature for us, and we see continued need for a really significant amount of drivers for a very long time to come. There are use cases where, when my mom goes to the airport, she wants someone to help her with her luggage. When I'm going on a trip and I'm eager to learn about a new city or place, I want to talk to the driver and have that interaction. And then, of course, there are other use cases that might be great for, like Zoox in Vegas is super fun to, be in your kind of train compartment and have a social dynamic around that ride experience. So I think there's going to be different use cases, some of which are going to lend themselves really well to autonomous, and others will lend themselves really well to drivers. Over the long term, as autonomous becomes more ubiquitous, as costs go down, as adoption grows, we aspire to a future in which drivers can participate in that as well. And entrepreneurial drivers can perhaps own a small fleet of vehicles that they deploy across different marketplaces and use that as a way to make money. And the last thing is, within FlexDrive, we run this operationally intensive fleet business, and over a third of our employees for FlexDrive are former Lyft drivers or still drive for Lyft. And so I think there are going to be certainly emerging fields as well that are going to become more and more important. And our job is to continue to create economic mobility for our drivers in a variety of different ways in that future.
Got it. Sascha, one thing I wanted to ask you on this driver note, when I think of Europe, I think of, good public transport. I think of strong labor. Someone's always on strike, when you go to Europe, air traffic controllers, trains. What do you think, the impact is on, I guess some of the, I guess you mentioned some of the positives, right? If these public transports have drivers that are getting older or retiring, you can kind of help there. But what about the kind of disruption? I feel like there's going to be a lot of pushback in Europe, more so than here because of that strong labor. Have you thought about that? What we saw with Uber, kind of going into Europe 10 years ago, there's still a lot of places you can't get Uber in Europe, right? They had a lot more headwinds there. So how do you think about that human driver component when you're building out your business?
I think it's important to consider in which kind of service you're going to deploy and what is going to be the transformation for the workforce. So that's why we have chosen this approach for Europe to specifically target the public transport area. And for sure, they have drivers, but the situation today, even if you look on the specifics in Germany, is that we have to bring in bus drivers from Kenya to operate buses in some of the rural areas in Germany. So it's like the lack of drivers is already happening today. And so what we see is that the unions definitely, they want to reduce the hours of driving for the drivers that are still in operation, at the same time qualify them to take more compelling jobs in the future. And what we see is that for the whole validation verification, which will require a lot of local support, is the qualification for the safety drivers. And that's what we do with our drivers already today in Hamburg, that we use a fraction of the drivers to become safety drivers. Others will move into the area of remote operations that will be required. And then if you operate more vehicles as they are more flexible, you need more people in the remote operations. You need qualified staff to run the operations, and therefore you need people on the hub to take care of the vehicles. And it's not only cleaning, you also need qualified staff to take care of, are the sensors in shape? Is the vehicle in its form? Is it totally fine for the operation, and so on? So what we see is that the jobs will change, and they will be rather qualified compared to the job of a driver. And that's why so far we see no pushback from unions or from the public transport space in that extent.
Got it. Michael, what do you think about the kind of disruption that AV will cause? In terms of Zoox, you guys are AV focused with the vehicles. Lyft has 500,000 human drivers they have to worry about. You guys don't necessarily, I don't know if I'd call that a problem, but you don't have to think about that. Are you kind of focused on your mission and let other folks worry? Or are you thinking about, some of these like second order effects?
Yeah, I mean, so focused on our mission for sure. I think as we're talking about some of the things here, particularly, we're creating new jobs that didn't exist before. And so I think one of the things that's been really inspiring of seeing folks, and, as Sascha mentioned, we've got dozens of sensors on the vehicle, right? We've got, they're floating data centers, right? So there's some high paying jobs that we've created in Las Vegas specifically, where people are making 50% more than they were in their previous roles. There's jobs from remote operations and things like that, and rider operations that just didn't exist before. I think we're seeing this in AI in general, of jobs that didn't exist 18 months ago. So that's been really inspiring to see. And I think for us, our mission is to really change what mobility is, and the lexicon of, what riding is, but more of giving people back time. And, having them see this new configuration. By the way, would love to have you out for a ride sometime, because I think that'd be fun. But I think it's a different experience. And I think once people get that experience, that's what our real mission is, of what they'll have, their new freedoms that they'll be able to have.
Got it. What do you think it is that, you're trying to sell or offer to the customer over the long term? I think some companies, I think I saw an earlier panel, they were talking a little bit about the Waymo approach. They're partnering with OEMs and different vehicle, and, really kind of maybe gravitating more towards just being the tech, right? Not having to do hardware, not having to do some of the hard things. How do you think about that for Zoox? Do you want, you guys to own the AV, own the vehicles going forward, or?
Our current approach is to manufacture, build the vehicles, right?
It's what?
It's to manufacture and build the vehicles.
Got it.
And then manage the fleets. Yeah. And really focus in on what that customer experience is, and, what we can do with it. So yeah, that's what our focus is, and that's where we're moving towards.
Sascha, so you've got some experience, right, building vehicles, or at least coming, from the VW arm. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is the incentive, I guess, for VW to kind of launch, go with MOIA and, sort of launch this venture? I'm assuming VW, OEM, they want to sell cars, right? So how do you help make that happen, basically?
Yeah, so what we create is more or less the ecosystem that enables Volkswagen to build vehicles and get them in operation, not by operating the vehicles. So there we have a different approach, whether we want to collaborate with public transport fleet operators, but also other professional private fleet operators, as it's the situation in the US, and provide them with a product where they can use our fleet management, where they have the passenger management, so they can take care of the cabin safety, and where they have the autonomous vehicles with an integrated SDS. And this is our approach. And what we do together with Volkswagen is build those vehicles specifically for a scaling market. So we can't build vehicles for just services with a limited 3-digit amount of vehicles in place. For us, it's only a business if we scale into the 10,000s of vehicles per year. And that's the intention that we are following. And for this, we need to have all the industrial industrialized processes in place. So it needs to be a serial production vehicle that runs ready for operations from the factory. You need to have the after-sales procedure, and you need to have all the service components in place, like workshops and the whole network behind that. And actually, that's for us, it's a very important aspect. If you want to get into unit economics, you need to consider this whole value chain, and that's what we do.
Got it. Cool. Well, I think I really appreciate the three of you coming, joining, and sharing three unique perspectives. Definitely excited to try out the Zoox pretty soon, maybe on Lyft, and on my next trip to Europe, you'll be calling me. So let's thank all of our panelists, Stephen, Michael, and Sascha. Thank you.